Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. We're picking things back up now after the draft, hoping to hit on some of the quarterbacks that either just barely went undrafted or were drafted towards the end of it that I was not able to cover before the draft. And today we're going to be talking about Luke Altmeyer. After I knock out a few more of these, talking about some of the guys at the back end of the quarterback class, hope to have one more recap episode just to talk about overall rankings and then the landing spots for each of these players. But we'll start today just by talking about Luke Altmeyer's game. Altmeyer started at Ole Miss and played there for 2 years as a backup kind of gadget player. He's pretty quick, and so they would often use him in very specific packages, take advantage of his legs. But given the amount of quarterbacks Lane Kiffin churns through that program, Altmeyer found himself on the outside looking in at Ole Miss and found an opportunity at Illinois where for 3 years he was really successful. Very productive player, brought Illinois along with their head coach Brett Bielema to new heights that they hadn't been at in a long time and had a pretty successful season this past year. So he's been in college for a long time now. He's been in college for 5 years and had a lot of success in his last 3 seasons. Overall, Altmeyer has decent physical tools. He's about 6'2", 210, so nothing crazy, but not undersized from a height perspective, probably a little lighter than you would hope for. So let's get into some of the positives with Altmeyer. First, I think you do have to start with the experience for him. He's just played a lot of football, and you can tell he's pretty comfortable within Illinois' offense. Illinois runs a lot of plays where they run like deep crossers across the other side of the field after they clear out a defender from that side of the field. And he's very comfortable with waiting for those throws to come open and understanding like when he has the look to take that shot versus when he needs to play more conservatively and check the ball down or make a play himself. So I think you do see that experience come through in his game. As evidenced by the way Ole Miss used him early in his career, he also is a mobile player. So he's quick enough where you can run some QB keepers with him. It's not a guy that you want to run in between the tackles all the time, but he is athletic enough for that to be a part of his game. In general, I would say he's a pretty creative thrower as well. Given his athleticism, that's something that does show up on the throwing side. He does have kind of a 3/4 motion, but that I think does allow him to get throws off sometimes in the pocket that he might otherwise would not be able to. But he does have to pay the tax on that at times because his release is lower. He often does have times where he just can't get a throw off in a crowded pocket. But you see the release on the run show up where he's kind of trying to find a window. He's stepping up. He's looking to wrap a throw around a defender. Those are the plays where Altmeyer does have some success. On that similar note about his creativity, I do think overall he is comfortable operating in the pocket late into the down. So I think his vision downfield is pretty good. He's willing to stick with plays and read them out and really try to find that explosive. And he's also good at stepping up into the pocket to capture that space that's voided by the defense in order to put himself in a better position to make that sort of throw. Those are most of the good things I see with Altmeyer. Now, let's move to some of the things I think he struggles with. On that same note of being comfortable operating in later portions of the down, I do think sometimes that is a problem for Altmeyer. He's pretty indecisive at times, and there's just plays where he takes another beat or two before he makes the throw when the guy's already open. And sometimes that leads to tighter windows. Sometimes that leads to balls getting tipped. There are a lot of plays on tape where you see this could have been a little cleaner if you just got to the right decision earlier. There's times where he makes up for that with a really good throw or strong chemistry between he and his receiver to put the ball in a good place. But in the NFL, those windows will continue to get tighter, and I think his decisiveness will need to improve. He doesn't have a great arm. You see throws loop a lot to the other side of the field. You don't really see him rip deep balls. A lot of times they're slower, take some more time to get down the field. So that's certainly not a strength of his game. His arm is sufficient for college, but at the next level, it's certainly not a plus for him. I also think in general, he's not a quick mover in the pocket. So we talked earlier about his athleticism and his ability to, take the ball and run, make something happen on a quarterback keeper, all of those sorts of things I think he's pretty good at. I don't think he's a super fast mover in the pocket to the extent that some of the other elite athletes at quarterback are. He's more just solid there. So yes, he can make some things happen with his legs, but I don't think this is a guy that's going to be elite at avoiding sacks at the next level. And sometimes you see him make poor decisions that lead to some sacks on his college film. He hesitates way too much. That kind of goes back to the indecisiveness. There's just times where, that leads to poor decision making or making a play more difficult than it has to be. And I also think on top of that, his feet are sometimes not great in the pocket. He will a lot of times be flat-footed, which leads to that extra beat before he can get a throw off because he's got to generate power. And it's really difficult to do that when your feet are not, in that sort of rhythm that you need to be able to plant and throw. So that is a concern I have with him as well from a mechanical perspective. Other than that, I also think that one of the things with Altmeyer trying to see, because this, let's be real, this isn't like a top of the draft guy, right? This is more of a late round guy. The question is more, can this guy be an effective backup and then maybe develop into a better player throughout his career? The question I have with him is, can he be that sort of RPO guy that comes in, gets the easy stuff done, has enough aggressiveness in his game to make a few big throws a game, but it's never really going to be some sort of dynamic, explosive player. You're kind of just hoping from a baseline floor from his play. One of the concerns I have with him in that is I think he is inaccurate in the short game way too often to just be a guy that operates within the RPO structure. And that is the place where I think if he was more accurate in the short game, I think that's probably where he's most useful, is a guy that has enough quickness to be able to use his feet. He has enough processing speed and ability there to make proper reads within that structure. But I do think his accuracy struggles, and that kind of pushes me away from thinking this guy's just some sort of plug and play backup that can give you, 70% of your offense's production. So that's my overall thoughts on Altmeyer. I would say a couple names that come to mind for me from a comp perspective from him would be like a Bailey Zappi. But Altmeyer is a little more athletic than Zappi, but you're talking about guys that are pretty limited physically and have to operate at a really high level outside of that in order to be productive players. Zappi showed some flashes that had some people a little bit excited, but overall it was pretty obvious, fairly quickly that this guy was not going to be some sort of dynamic player that you want to hit your offense to. I think I feel similarly about that with Altmeyer. He also could kind of be in the Taylor Heineke area. I think Heineke's a little bit better athlete than Altmeyer is, probably a little bit bigger and stronger, but Altmeyer I don't think is as aggressive of a scrambler either. But from a physical tools perspective, they're probably not too far separated from each other. So I do think Altmeyer's most likely outcome is probably a third quarterback on a roster that never really develops enough for him to be like a top flight backup, but maybe has some chances to back up a quarterback at some point. But overall, I think his ceiling is probably somewhere in that high-level backup range. I don't really see anything beyond that, just given the physical tool limitations, along with multiple other concerns I have in his game outside of the tools. So I have a UDFA grade on Altmeyer, and spoiler alert, this is what happened in the draft. There were some people that thought he was going to go late, for rounds 5 through 7. He ended up falling out, and Detroit signed him as an undrafted free agent. Did get some guaranteed money from Detroit. I think clearly had multiple suitors that were interested in him as a UDFA, but I think the NFL got it right there. I don't view Altmeyer as a gem in the late round. I view this guy more as a developmental player that you hope can eventually be a solid backup. So that does it for Luke Altmeyer. I'll continue to have a few more of these breakdowns coming on some of the remaining late round guys, so stay tuned for those.